How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Hey guys, we're going to do a very simple, basic 101 episode on the importance of doing your tours. The importance of actually physically doing your tours and not just putting in the logbook that you're touring. And the reason why we're going to have this discussion is because it still seems to be a problem, and I don't think a lot of people take it as serious as it should be. These tours, this is where the biggest liability is as a frontline professional, even as an immediate supervisor, all the way up to prison management. So when we come back from our sponsors, we're going to talk about the importance of doing those tours, maybe give some tips to do those tours, and just to kind of give you an understanding of why these tours are that important. Now, as always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell is going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor, and when we come back, let's discuss doing our tours.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems. Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description. And we are back. Guys, guess who's sitting in with me? Russ Hamilton. What's up, Russ?
Hey, Anthony, getting my workout on for today, trying to get ready to do some honeydews around the house, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I saw your picture on Facebook of your miles ran today.
Yeah, it's hard getting back into the swing. Today I only did, 2 1/3, but still working on the plantar fasciitis a little bit. Should be back up to that magic, 6.25 mile run thing, hopefully in a few weeks. But, it's going slow. I've got to shed a little bit of weight and stuff first.
Well, I'm going to tell you something. Me and Russ had a chance to do audio for our podcast, the Tier Talk podcast. It's a bonus one. It will be released later today, and it's going to be about inmate unity, what causes inmates to unite. It's a very good dialogue. Again, it's meant to start the discussion. That's the key. Now, the reason why I wanted to go into this topic real quick is because I still feel that people don't understand the importance of doing their tours. I saw a recent article that's happening out of Rikers Island, 17 COs kind of being disciplined for a transgender inmate that died. I believe the inmate suffered from epilepsy. Now, guys, I'm not going to focus too much on that because I don't really know the circumstances. I know that they're trying to say in the article that there was a chance that the inmate wasn't seen or wasn't checked on for 42 minutes. And this was in a close watch area, which required 15-minute checks. But again, that still hasn't been confirmed, but it's the article that motivated me to do this topic. So I don't know really what's going on with those 17 COs. I just wanted to tell you what motivated me to do this topic with Russ, and then also obviously in the wake of the Epstein case. So Russ, obviously, tours are important, correct?
Yeah, that's kind of the standard that we set so that, we have some benchmark to go off of. And most of the time, unfortunately, that benchmark tends to revolve around accountability. So, if you're out there and you have a tour to do and, it has to get logged in and all of those things, if you're not doing them, you're playing with fire, because, that's really what they are going to use in order to probably fire you. There's a lot of different situations that you can get caught up in, but, you have to do that. And so hopefully you'll be using the tools that help you get that done. A lot of times, some places are old and they still use the old paper logs. You can't paper whip that thing. Hopefully you have something a little more technological to be able to prove that you were at a given cell at a given point in time.
Now, before we go a little deeper, I want to know if you guys could see my lemonade. There's something there that's floating in it. I don't know if you guys could see. Oh, shit. I don't know if you guys could see it, but there's something floating in this lemonade. I haven't yet identified what that is, but I am thirsty. So I am going to continue to drink because I am thirsty. But I'll figure out what it is, either when it's left by itself without the liquid around it, or maybe if it accidentally goes in my mouth like this. I don't know what that was. It's got a little bit of a crunch, and that's pretty. It's pretty unique, being that it's been in liquid. Wow, it's got a sweetness to it, and then a lot of salt. Very unique. Sorry, man, just have a little fun. Hey, when you have major incidents that happen in the jail, let's say a death of an inmate, whether it's suicide, an assault, or even a sexual assault. When it gets called in, the first thing administration is going to want is, until they can pool the videos, because trust and believe those videos are going to be pooled, they want the logbooks, or however it is those tours are reported. Like Russ said, I mean, you have Guardian RFID that has a tracking system that actually, I believe, keeps track of the tours that are being done. When the officer goes cell to cell, they can scan something in, which actually is great, because that does actually motivate the officers to kind of do their rounds. And again, we're not even just talking about the officers. Also, we have medical. Connie may drop a video for us later on today discussing the importance of those late night rounds. But again, before everything gets looked into, the first thing we get, besides the reports, is going to be the request for the logbooks, or however it's recorded, and the video footage. Now, if the concern right off the bat is if the logbooks don't match up with the video footage. So I see Russ nodding his head on that. Russ, how important is it to make sure those logbooks match with that video footage?
Well, it's incredibly important. And especially, there's a lot of places out there these days that what they've gone to is, zero tolerance for, any sort of dishonesty whatsoever. So if your little, trek around the housing unit doesn't match up with, what you've put in the log and what's shown on the camera, that little bit of dishonesty is often more than enough to get you fired. That's not the kind of thing we want to do. First of all, you should always be honest in your job. Second of all, there's a reason for doing those particular rounds. And one of the things that your organization, your facility, your department is really going to be focused on is shielding themselves from liability. That's why we do these rounds. Whether it's 15 minutes or 30 or an hour or whatever it is, it's to stop and to bolster that shield against getting sued. Because we're in a very litigious society. We're in a time of where everything is a knee-jerk reaction to anything bad at all that happens to an inmate, and so there's only so much that we can do about that. So we have to live on that end of constant, eternal vigilance.
Right, and by the way, we're in a position of trust, which means that basically the public is trusting us to do our job without being micromanaged. You know what I mean? So, the integrity of that logbook, the integrity of the writer putting the information into that logbook or into whatever the database may be is extremely, extremely important. It's that level of trust. Now, once that trust gets violated, it's not even just the fact that you may lose your job. I mean, that to me is not even the biggest concern. I mean, the biggest concern is going to be because you were put in that position of trust and you violated. You got to realize something. That level of trust also gives you a high level of responsibility and or accountability. So, I mean, outside of getting fired, you could be criminally charged. Correct, Russ?
Yeah, that it depends. Of course, that criminal bar is usually going to be set pretty high. But, depending on the situation, we could get into some areas and, varies a lot state by state where we start talking about things like depraved indifference. We've all, seen a few of those stories where someone was not checked on for many hours, or we never bothered to check on whether or not they had water in their cell, things like that. You guys know the stories. I mean, we've all seen them. And, the thing is that those headlines are probably always worse than they actually are. But nevertheless, we have a standard that we have to uphold, and we have a duty to a certain amount of care, like it or not, that we have to, bring to these inmates. And so when those bad things happen, the easiest thing to fix is do your rounds. I mean, it's pretty simple. Do them, check on things, be proactive, preemptive, and that way you don't get caught behind that 8-ball and end up, being smashed in some wreck where you're trying to fix things and pencil whip them on a piece of paper or something.
Right. And as we talked about before, it is the biggest level of liability because when there is a death, everybody's going to go and try to attack the system at every level possible, from policy procedures to individuals on the floor. Now, granted, the first thing administration is going to do is, again, they're going to request the logbooks, the reports, the tours by the supervisors. They're going to pull the footage. And basically the key is that they want to make sure that the staff member who's in charge of those tours did what's expected of them, did their tours every half an hour, or if it's a close watch, maybe every 15 minutes. If it was a constant watch, that they weren't distracted long enough for the inmate to do something foolish. Now, mind you, stuff happens along the way. Sometimes there's emergent situations. You're just going to have to be able to justify that. I wasn't able to do this tour because such and such happened, but immediately after that was resolved, I went ahead and continued my tour. Do not go back into the logbook and put down that you did the tours at that time, because that's what's really going to get you in trouble. Sometimes there become situations where there is something emergent. As you're doing a tour, you could have an inmate having a medical issue. And as you're trying to address that inmate's medical issue, another inmate sees that as a time to either, commit some type of assault or kill themselves. But the point is, if you're concerned about this medical issue, you document that. Say, at this point here, I apologize. Yeah, there was about 45 minutes where I wasn't able to check on that inmate, only because if you notice at that time, there was a medical code and our attention was diverted to the medical code, and we didn't hear anybody screaming from their cells, or if it was a suicide, it went unnoticed for 45 minutes because, again, there was an emergent situation that I had to address immediately. So the other thing is that when the facility holds you accountable for those half an hour tours, when it comes to the supervisors, we expect the supervisors to make sure those tours are going to be done. Because remember, when the supervisor goes into those units, and again, whether it's a logbook or whatever it is, and they sign in to say everything seems to be okay, they also may have to do one physical tour. So I don't know, maybe they visit the unit twice. One of them should be a physical tour, because I know it will be asked if, outside the officer doing their tour, did a supervisor at least do one cell by cell? Did the supervisor at least make sure also that the officer was doing their tour? So when the supervisor comes in and says everything's okay, one of the questions the supervisor should be asking and making sure of is that, hey, did you go ahead and do your tours? What did you see? Any concerns you have? And then maybe that first round, they go ahead and do a cell by cell. Again, for that immediate frontline supervisor, that's our buffer. That's the liability side. So that's where when management comes in and management says, were the tours done, they're going to first check the officer. They're going to first also then check on the subsequent supervisors that entered the unit. And if by chance the tours were done and everything's good, we're in a very good position because, again, there may be a half an hour, but a lot can happen in that half an hour as long as we're able to show that we were active and we were within policy and procedure. Now, real quick, people could still fight policy and procedure and say, well, that unit should be toured more than that. Sometimes it's just not feasible, especially when you work third shift and you have one officer, covering a bigger area. By the time they do their first round of tours, they can't sit down. They really can't put nothing in the lobby, but they have to get right back up and go again, especially if you're working in those older facilities that they have, one officer to 4 tiers. One officer to 4 tiers. That means by the time they go up and down, all the way up, it's a lot. So by the time they sit down, they're back at it again. And again, sometimes inmates you're going to see when there's a little bit of a downtime in between tours, and that's when they kind of may decide to do something foolish, and that's when we're protected by showing, hey, I went around every 30 minutes, as you can see, and therefore if they did it, they may have did it within exactly when I passed up their cell till I got it again. But, hey, Russ, you were immediate frontline supervisor. What was it like for you when you did your first rounds? What did you expect from your officers?
Well, one thing I think that needs to be pointed out here is if you are a supervisor or if you are a manager and someone has an emergency or there's a situation that's just, causing them to miss that round or whatever, get them the resources they need, not just to take care of the emergency, but to continue on with the rounds. If they have a responsibility to stop by each cell door, you have a responsibility to make sure that they're able to stop by each of those doors. The end of the responsibility chain isn't just with that officer that's assigned to that area, right? So I think that's one thing that you really have to look out for. Just make sure that you get people the resources they need. If you're there and you're doing your tours as a supervisor, be asking your people, what's going on? What can I do to facilitate and make, this particular shift, each and every day as it occurs successful? Because if they have some impediment to that and they've approached other supervisors or managers and they haven't been willing to try and get them what they need, and then something bad does happen, it will crawl back up the chain to you. So, let's not leave people in the lurch. I'm a real big proponent of that. I want to make sure that, everyone is not only safe, but they're professionally safe so that they get to keep their job, they get to keep their pension, they get to, keep those things that are important to them.
You made a good point about the resources too, because again, as an officer, sometimes what happens is if we're working in a big enough area, we may not be able to actually do our tours every half an hour because maybe the layout just seems to be that it's just such a big area. And then you got one officer, that has to cover this big area, especially if it's like, you may have only 80 inmates, but if they're locked in and individually celled, then it goes across 4 tiers. That's a very big area to cover. Now, if you notice, let's say you also work in an area where they decide to put inmates that are 15-minute watches mixed in with inmates that are regular half-an-hour watches, that could be tough too. And what you need to do is you need to write a report saying, hey, listen, I got a lot of inmates here that are different levels of watch. I have inmates that are, regular watches, but I have inmates that are 15-minute watches. So right now, if I try to do this, I can't seem to get to these inmates every 15 minutes. I'm going to need help, like Russ said. I'm going to need some resources. Now, you put that in paper, keep a copy of that, cover yourself, but do not lie in the logbook. Do not lie in that database. What you're going to do is you're going to put back and be honest with your tours. You're doing the best you can. So you don't have to hide nothing. Just say, you know what, I'm sorry I couldn't get to this guy in 20 minutes. Because again, you already notified your supervisor that, hey, I'm sorry, it's becoming complicated. I'm not able to get to this person every 15 minutes. So again, let's say it's middle of the night, 1:20, 1:40, 2 o'clock, and if they go up and say, hey, listen, your tours are going every 20 minutes instead of 15. I know, but I wrote a report and I asked for help. So the funny thing is if you don't write that report and you don't ask for help, and let's say by chance there is a problem, but you're still putting in the book that you're able to do these 15-minute tours, that's going to be on you now when stuff happens and you go to say it after the fact saying, well, I couldn't get it. Well, why didn't you tell anybody? Why didn't you put that report in? Or why are you still writing in the logbook that you were able to do this every 15 minutes? A lot of us get concerned with so much on wanting to follow policy and procedure that they're willing to either bend over backwards or thinking it's their fault. They may slightly adjust that logbook when they don't realize, like Russ said, you're not giving me the resources to do it. So go ahead and put it back on the supervisor and be honest. Say, listen, I've been trying to do this tour. I'm doing it correctly. I just can't get to these inmates here every 15 minutes. It's going to require me at least 20 or 25 minutes. Can I get some help? And if the supervisor says there's nothing I can do about it, okay, I wrote my report. I covered my end. But now when you start looking at that logbook is going to have 25-minute intervals. And then eventually when that gets looked at, because don't forget, the supervisor is going to come in and they're signing off on that saying it's okay. So the supervisor should be like, well, wait a second. Why are these at 25-minute intervals? Because I told you I'm having issues. So I need your help or I'm going to continue to do it this way. I have no choice. And that really puts the supervisor on a spot. That should be enough to motivate that supervisor, take that logbook if they're allowed to, bring it up to the lieutenant or the high-level manager and say, hey, we have an issue here. And the issue is this officer saying they can't do the job. They're putting this in the logbook. And, I spoke to the officer. I see what he's saying. It's really taking a process to do it every 15 minutes. We're going to need to help that officer. What's your thoughts on that? And that was a great thing that you said, Russ, about the resources.
Well, one thing I think that we're treading on here is kind of the elephant in the room. When you're doing these tours, especially when we're talking about doing them at night, what is the one thing that's always in those post orders that they tell you is that you have to see, living, breathing flesh. Well, how do you do that? You flash your light in there and, what if it takes you, 10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute to see that inmate breathing for sure? I mean, can you really tell? It's really hard to do. So then by the time that you get to the end of the hallway or whatever place that you're in, how close are you to that mark then again? Where instead what they really want you to do is they really want you to hurry by and flash a light in each cell real quick and just, see that the guy's, still laying there. But then when somebody dies in their sleep in the middle of the night, then they wonder why you didn't discover it. And so that's the thing that they're going to be asking you. And then you're going to be saying, well, wait a minute, if I look in there and I have to spend, 10, 15, 20 seconds at each cell, then I can't get this done in time. And they're going to say, well, look, you wrote here in the logbook, you used the pipe to make that entry into the electronic tracking system. That's not our fault. And so there's some back and forth there. And I think that in some respects, administration is a little bit dishonest about that living, breathing flesh thing that they claim that they want. And, just how long an individual officer, actually sits there at each cell trying to make sure that someone actually is breathing.
And what's funny is we're talking a lot about the overnight shift. I want you to know the reason why overnight shift does come into play is because that's when you're running on that skeleton crew, and that's when you're given bigger areas. On the earlier shifts, hopefully you have enough manpower. I know there's a lot of stuff going on. Facilities should be a little active on the earlier shifts. So what happens here is that you should have a partner. One can focus on the daily activities of the unit, but then you should have one that's still going around on those floors, checking things cell by cell, or if need be, walking the dorm. But again, conversation seems to be pushing a lot towards third shift because I believe also when it comes to those tours, that's where the biggest liability may be because that's where kind of the world is quiet at that point, and you yourself have to make sure that your presence is known, however unexpected that presence is, because that's key too. When we talk about doing the tours, even though we're saying every half an hour, whatever it is that policy says, it's not every half an hour on the spot. You're going to divvy up the times and kind of keep inmates on their feet. I mean, there could be times if you're able to, if your unit is small enough, is that you could do a tour and then quickly do another tour. Be sporadic with those tours so inmates can't really plan against that gap of time because they don't know what that gap of time is going to be. Now, real quick, before we come to a close, you also have the close watches and constant watches. You have inmates that are placed there for a reason, whether it's suicidal, whether it's a medical concern, whatever the case may be. And with that said, if you're not constantly on that individual, or in some cases, I noticed that there could be watches that are done in, let's say, a jail, like a booking area. And now someone comes in, you're booking this individual, and you're so short-staffed that while you're booking this individual, you don't have a chance to check on this inmate every 15 minutes. You better call the supervisor immediately, because I'm gonna tell you where a lot of the concern is. This is where people try to push the buck. Some of us are afraid to request for help Never be afraid. I don't care if you have an asshole supervisor. If you're stuck in a position that you can't manage because you have those limited resources like Russ mentions, then put that supervisor on the spot. If you're booking somebody and it's taking longer than, let's say, 15 minutes, and you know for a fact that you have to get to this one inmate, tell that supervisor right on the radio, I need help. While I'm booking, can you help me either doing the booking or can you help me do these rounds? So, because here's what happened, guys. Sometimes we have an issue with dual attention, if you will. So we may get so caught up in the booking that we may actually forget momentarily that we have this watch every 15 minutes. It's very important that whatever we have that's of that serious nature, like a watch like that the attention goes specifically to that watch and can't get diverted elsewhere. What's your thoughts on that, Russ?
You know, that's one of the things, or at least that concept is one of the things that I bring up when I teach about complacency. And that's a situation that I call the complacency of routine. And we get to the point where, hey, we're doing these watches and stuff, and then we start tricking ourselves out. Well, why are we really doing it? Nothing ever happens. And though we may not be saying that in a conscious fashion, it starts to seep into our subconscious, and we just think, you know what, I'll do my tour, 5 or 10 minutes after I'm done dealing with this guy or this situation. And it's never been a problem before. And because it's never been a problem before, it can never be a problem in the future, right? And that's the complacency of routine. Because it hasn't been an issue in the past, there's no way that it can be an issue in the future. And yet, that's how a lot of people meet their demise, in their career, or a setback, a suspension, some days on the beach, whatever, is because, that looking forward is different from looking back.
Well said, Russ. And I think another part I just want to revisit again real quick is that when you have an assignment that requires 100% of your attention, there's no way you can add on to them another assignment. So if I have that 15-minute watch, and I got to focus on that every 15 minutes, and I got to give that 100% of my effort, you can't give me something else that could take my mind off that also requires 100% of my effort, because we may get so stuck up in that task to get that task done that we're going to forget that, oh my God, I got this 15-minute watch going on. But again, you as the officer, you have to make it known. If that's happening to you, you got to document it. Don't just say, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this, because you're putting too much on your shoulders. And if something goes wrong, I will guarantee you that nice nature that you have saying, I'll step up and I don't want to be a burden, management's not going to care. When liability hits the fan, they don't care that you were being the nice guy. They're going to bury you because they have to, because of liability. So yes, Mr. Gangi, who was so nice all the time saying, don't worry, I can handle both. I can handle both. Wow, Mr. Gangi's so nice. Officer Gangi's so nice. He goes above and beyond. Wait till Officer Gangi winds up overwhelming himself and Officer Gangi makes a mistake. Management's going to come back, and they don't care how nice Officer Gangi is. They're going to come out after Officer Gangi, and they're probably going to come after the supervisor that says, listen, I don't care if Officer Gangi said yes to that. Why did you go ahead and overburden Officer Gangi with booking and 15-minute watches? Either way, they're going to wind up slipping on the booking part, or they're going to wind up slipping on the 15-minute watches. And again, that's what happens, like Russ said, when you're working in facilities that have policies and procedures, but don't have the resources to meet those policies and procedures. Hey, Russ, do you have anything you'd like to say in closing?
You know what? Just the usual. Just want to mention that love all my brothers and sisters in the correctional field out there. And it's been a pleasure, coming on here and chewing the fat and discussing this issue with you. And I just hope everyone out there is having as good a weekend as I am right now.
Yeah, and I wanted to keep this video quick because I want to make sure that people can just jump on, watch it real quick, get some good information, and then go about their day. But it's definitely important. I was motivated to do this video. Russ was motivated to come on. Now, guys, as always, if you're on the Facebook community, please check out the Tier Talk Facebook community. Definitely check out Keepers of Chaos. Very good community. Remember, Chaos is K-A-O-S. Very good communities there, very interactive. And also Tier Talk podcast. We should have one coming out today about inmate unity. And I guess you can hear from the dog that he's cueing me that the show is over. And that's not even my dog. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. That bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. Stay safe.
Whoa.